Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur, today talking about the federal election, but this time specifically as it relates to pro-life issues. The abortion question. Yes, okay, so those of us who are pro-life, we have to make a decision. If pro-life is, one of your top priorities as to how you're going to place your vote, where should you place your vote this time around? Okay, so going to talk about that today with our guest joining us from Edmonton, Cameron Wilson. He's the executive director of the Wilberforce Project, their website, thewilberforceproject.ca. So Cam, good to have you with us, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, why don't you tell our viewers, some people might go, what's the Wilberforce Project? Okay, I know, wasn't he the guy involved with setting, slaves free in Great Britain? Yep. So tell us what the Wilberforce Project is all about.
So the Wilberforce Project is an Alberta-based pro-life organization dedicated to protecting the preborn and the vulnerable from abortion and euthanasia through political action. Now, the reason why we chose William Wilberforce as our model is, as you said, he was the great British parliamentarian who ended the slave trade in the United Kingdom, and actually also here in Canada. So when that bill passed in the United Kingdom, that also ended the slave trade here in Canada because of the association between Canada and Great Britain at the time. And so he's this great reformer who really is the first man that we are aware of in political history who brought about massive social change through the democratic process, an institution that has been around in almost every single society from as far back as we have records. Slavery was brought to an end primarily because of people banding together in a mass political association to bring down the slave trade. And so naturally, when we look at the historical roots of our movement, of the pro-life movement, the idea that human beings have an obligation in our politics not merely to advance the cause of our nation, but also within our nation to advance the cause of justice in our laws, to make sure that the weak and the vulnerable are not taken advantage of by the powerful, the rich, and the wealthy. And that idea that we have an obligation as citizens to use our vote to advance that interest, that really starts with William Wilberforce. And so when we're fighting against abortion, we're fighting against the most vulnerable sections of our society being exploited and being killed off in immense numbers. Obviously, that connection is a very strong connection. And it probably will help your viewers to know that William Wilberforce, in fact, was deeply devoted to his Christian faith. Mm-hmm. And he even wrote a book on apologetics. It's a very interesting read. It's a very interesting apologetics book that, if you're a C.S. Lewis fan, it's right up there with C.S. Lewis's work. And so it's a great read, and it's again, an example to us who have.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you giving us some historical background and perspective to this whole thing here, because in this short interview here today, we'll probably touch on, should Christians get involved in something like an election, right? There's many Christians who don't believe that we should, so we will touch base on that, but I think it's an opportunity to bring about good with every means that we have at hand. So, so thanks for sharing that. This is really, really important stuff. And you guys actually believe in lobbying government and making a difference through legislation, although that's not the only thing that's necessary. Of course, we need to have this whole thing coming from the grassroots up to change hearts and minds. So now realistically, this particular federal election is boiling down to a two-horse race, right? We either get fourth straight Liberal government under Mark Carney, or we get a new Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre. Now, both parties officially pro-choice. So, where should pro-life voters park their votes? So maybe first of all, let's start with what is the Liberal Party's official stance, their position on abortion?
So the Liberal Party's official stance on abortion is that it should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy. It should be taxpayer funded through all 9 months of pregnancy. They punished New Brunswick when New Brunswick didn't offer taxpayer funding for abortion. They withheld some of the federal transfers to them. So they're even trying to micromanage the provinces and the provincial jurisdictions to push abortion. So they're 100% pro-abortion, fighting for it. And I don't expect Carney to be any different from Trudeau. In fact, given some of his connections in his life, he's probably going to be even more dedicated to left-wing social causes, and in particular fighting for abortion.
Okay, and do the Liberals still have that policy in place? So if you want to be a candidate for the party at this point, if you're pro-life, you will not be a candidate. That disqualifies you?
Yes. So
Okay.
You might be able to become a candidate if you promise you will never vote pro-life. In other words, if
Uh,
you promise to vote against your conscience, they might be willing to consider you, which is kind of an odd position to take that will take you
yeah,
forever.
no, I'm not sure if we want candidates like that running, period. Going opposite to your conscience. But okay. So what would the Conservative Party's abortion position be? I mean, again, they're pro-choice, but are there some differences?
There are actually a bunch of
Okay.
differences. So, for example, Pierre Poilievre would probably be open to a Preborn Victims of Violence Act. So right now in Canada, it's not a separate crime to harm a preborn child inside the mother when you commit an assault upon the mother. So there's often assaults that are committed with the intention of harming the preborn child, where you can only charge for the damage to the mother, even though the preborn child is killed or hurt as a result of it. And basically that's upholding choice. If you believe in choice, you really should believe there should be a consequence for taking the choice away. And so Pierre Poilievre has said that he has talked in the past supportively of that type of legislation. I don't know whether it'll be a government legislation or whether you just not get in the way of it. But in addition to that, there's an important distinction, and that is Conservative members of Parliament are allowed to vote their conscience on matters of conscience in the legislature, or in Parliament.
Yeah,
So
that to me is actually a really important difference for sure, allowing your members of the party to vote according to their conscience. I mean, that to me would seem to be a Canadian thing, right? Okay, let's allow some freedom for these things. The other issue that just pops into my mind here is sex-selective abortions as well. If we ever get legislation introduced again along those lines, would the Conservative Party be open to, again, allowing their members to vote accordingly, right?
Yeah. So if that was brought forward, it would not be brought forward as a government bill, but if a private member brought it forward and there was a majority of members in the House of Commons who were conservative, the bill would have a fighting chance of passing
Okay.
anyways.
And now what about the NDP? Well, I know they're not a pro-life party either. Is their position any different than the Liberals?
It's basically the exact same position. Interestingly enough, Tommy Douglas, the founder of the party, was actually a pro-life guy. He was a pastor. He was, his faith influenced his politics to a degree, and he believed that abortion was wrong, which is interesting because the founder of the party, the hero of the party, would not be allowed to run for the party today. That's how far from the founding they've gone.
Yeah, that's something to ponder, isn't it? Wow. Okay. The Bloc Québécois, of course, they're only in Quebec, but again, pro-choice, right?
Yeah, exact same position. Yeah.
Okay, so no difference there, really. What about the Green Party? I would assume somewhat similar to the Liberals?
Very similar. They have less of a party
Yeah.
apparatus to really push this stuff, but the de facto position is to really to push towards social liberalism and to
Okay.
because those are the voters they're pursuing.
Yeah, and one other party that comes to mind that's got a lot of candidates out there, and that is the People's Party of Canada with Maxime Bernier. It's kind of a weird mix, isn't it? Because of his past voting record on these issues, as Maxime Bernier, former Conservative member of Parliament. But he's made some interesting statements here. That their party position is, does have some pro-life elements, right?
It does actually, and so it certainly has free votes for its members of all of its MPs. Maxime Bernier himself, I believe, has pondered openly about a ban on third trimester abortion. I believe.
Yeah, my understanding is that is actually now on their. I think I saw it right on their website. That is what they are going with. That they're saying if they get elected, they're not going to be putting in. They wouldn't allow third term, late term abortions. So I mean that's a positive for sure.
That's a very positive piece of public policy. And so, yeah, and to add to that, they've got some very, very pro-life candidates as well running.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Good point. Okay. Yeah. Now, of course, I guess we have to juggle all of this. I mean, do some of these parties like the PPC have any realistic chance of electing a member. At this point, the polls are showing they're polling like 1-2%. So, probably not so much, right? There is another party, of course, that is the Christian Heritage Party, who are completely, pro-life, and they advertise as such. Now, the downside is that they have, as far as we can see from the track record and the polling, 0% of electing anyone and winning a seat at all. So, and the other problem is they have very few candidates running across the country. I'm not exactly sure how many, but it's not a lot. So most people won't actually have the opportunity to vote for them because there's nobody running in their riding, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, that gives us a little bit of a pickle here, right? So what do we do? I mean, so if you have a Christian Heritage Party candidate, for example, and a conservative in the very same riding, how do you decide as a pro-lifer who to vote for? How would you sort that out?
So I'd start with a couple of points. The first point that I'd make is that with the Christian Heritage Party, every candidate I've ever met to their party has been, one of the great Christians that you really want to encounter in your life. One of those people that you want to have in your church community because they will be a bulwark to that community.
Yeah.
And what they want most is to improve Canada. So usually when you cast your vote, recognize they're not going to take it personally if you don't vote for them, provided you are genuinely voting for a better candidate. And one of the things to recognize is, as you said right at the beginning, this is an election with, in a sense, a binary choice. The Liberals or the NDP in almost every riding in Alberta. There's one riding that could go three ways, but most ridings are Liberal NDP. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the most effective way we can use our vote to make a better candidate, a candidate that's more honoring to God? And the answer to that is, if on the issues that are likely to pass on the floor of the House of Commons, should they get there, how would this person vote? And if you've got a conservative candidate who's going to vote the right way on the issues that are likely to have a chance of passing on the floor of the House of Commons, so sex-selective abortion, third trimester abortion, whatever it is. If you've got a pro-life candidate, a candidate who will vote pro-life on that area from the Conservative Party, then that's a person you probably should support. Because if you don't support them, the person who's likely to win, who benefits by you not supporting them primarily, is going to be the Liberal candidate. But on the other hand, if you've got a candidate in the Conservative Party who won't even support preborn victims of violence, sex-selective abortion, those issues, who won't even give the most minimal amount, it actually hurts our movement to have that person in Parliament, because a Liberal member of Parliament only gets to vote against a pro-life bill once on the floor of the House of Commons. A Conservative gets to vote against it twice, once in caucus, where the group of the MPs get together and decide how they're going to approach an issue. They get to vote against it once there and once in the House of Commons. So we actually dilute our caucus by voting for a Conservative who doesn't share for our values. Doesn't share our values. And if we're worried about, in the end, this type of thing causing a vote split that caused the Liberals to win again, then perhaps it's incumbent upon the Conservatives to make sure that we put forward candidates that are worthy of support.
Okay, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, a lot of different nuances in this, decision on how should I best place my vote if pro-life is the main issue. So what do you say to conservative partisan voters, okay, who may be a little upset that you're not giving full endorsement to go vote conservative in this election?
Well, the answer I'll give is get involved in your nomination. So next time around, you have a pro-life candidate, and if the party brass just appoint a candidate in your area who's not pro-life, then that's on the party brass, right? If you want pro-lifers to just come out and vote for your candidate, then your candidate has to be offering the pro-lifers something that's worth supporting.
Yeah.
And if not, why do you expect pro-life voters to just go along with you? Pro-life voters are not in it for the tax cut. They're in it to protect human life.
Okay. Now, you're probably going to get some pushback as well from the left-wing parties out there, right? Liberal, NDP, Green, people who support them. And I know Christians who will vote for Liberal, NDP, or Greens. So why do you not see them as a vote possibility for a pro-life voter?
So my general rule of thumb is if your political party wouldn't allow you to run for to be the member of parliament in your area, you probably shouldn't vote for them. If you're excluded because of what you believe from being allowed to run for them, then how do you possibly think that everyone else who thinks like you, who would also be excluded from running for their party, should be voting for them? Surely, at the very least, people like you should be allowed to run for their party before you'll vote for them or be a partisan activating for them. And if not, you have to ask the question: why are you still supporting the party that dislikes you so much that you're not even allowed to run for them?
Those are very good points. Again, if you're just joining us, Cameron Wilson, our guest. The website for Cam's organization is thewilberforceproject.ca, a pro-life group that believes in getting involved in the political process. And now look, I mean, you and I can't tell someone who to vote for, right? I mean, I can't force somebody or say you need to do this. We all have our own convictions and so forth. But again, I know some Christians who do vote for Liberal or NDP or left-wing parties for various reasons. Often it's because of social issues. They love to help others. They see the needy people out there, and there's maybe a direct program that's kind of more of a handout sort of thing, or whatever that helps them. Tommy Douglas, again, former pastor, founder of the NDP. Let's go use that kind of approach. So how do we determine which issues would be at the top of Jesus's election issues, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, and that's, as you said, that's ultimately a question of conscience. And just like we believe freedom of conscience for members of parliament, each individual voter has that freedom of conscience. But I want to put something forward for your viewers who find themselves in that camp, who really like position on immigration or the environment or for protecting the vulnerable that is put forward by some of the left-wing parties. And that is, when a nation kills 100,000 of its own people, of its own children every year, that greatest gift that God can give a nation is its children. And when we reject that gift and murder 100,000 of them every year, paid for by tax dollars, and a large number of them, thousands of them, are actually past the point at which they can feel pain. So they're being tortured to death in their mothers by taxpayer dollars. Do you actually think that a country that has that kind of a weight on its shoulders, that has that kind of a rejection of reality that comes with such an immense crime, that such a country could be blessed by God? And if it can't be blessed by God, if it can't be blessed, and it can't be, if you can't honestly look me in the eyes and say, I believe Canada deserves freedom, I believe Canada deserves these social programs, it deserves all of these things because of the way we've been acting, then we honestly have to ask, is it time that we, as Christians, start putting our votes in a place where we start making a country that deserves to have these things, that deserves to have environmental programs that protect nature, that deserves to have a country that protects the vulnerable, the poor, that deserves to have a healthy, solid immigration system that works? Can we honestly say that we deserve that with what we're doing? And if we don't, should we change our behavior, voting pattern?
I mean, who? When we say we care about the vulnerable, who are the most vulnerable? And I think we all agree that that's children, right? And now, again, we're going to have to get into a bit deeper here. When does life begin, and so forth. We're going to get to that question here as well. Let me ask you first, though. What do you say to Christians who say, well, we shouldn't actually get involved in voting at all because, after all, we don't see in Scripture where Jesus, lobbied political leaders and so forth. Although I did hear an interesting response here recently on that, and that is one of my guests pointed out, Jesus took the time to make a whip, and he went out and turned over the money-changing tables at the temple, drove those folks out. In the political, I guess, leaders of the day situation there, yeah, those were leaders that he was addressing very directly in that sense by saying, this needs to stop. He was making a point, wasn't he? So anyway, just my 2 cents worth. But your thoughts on that, Ken?
So the Bible, in my opinion, is very clear that we have a civic responsibility to be good community members. And in the case of the Roman Empire, when you had the Primus Inter Pares, Caesar Augustus during Jesus' very early life, and then Tiberius for the rest of his life, where you basically had an emperor, that meant loyalty to the emperor. That was the political expectation of its citizens. And you actually see from Jesus, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And that means that obedience in things that Caesar has the right to obedience in, and also, taxation and all those things. He says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And he also, interestingly enough, I would say that he does lobby a political figure. If you see the exchange between him and Pontius Pilate, right, he doesn't take away from Pontius Pilate the right to make the decision, although that's within his capacity to do. But he does he makes Pontius Pilate know that if he does not do the right thing, that it's on him. And he makes it very clear to Pontius Pilate what the right thing would be. And then he steps back and lets Pontius Pilate make the decision. Because that was the system they had at the time. And so today we live in a democratic system. Being a good citizen, a good member of our society, means that we take the political power that our society has devolved to us, and we sincerely make an effort to use that to make a better society. And I think that's a biblical connection, not a direct connection, but a biblical connection nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We have an opportunity to do good. Again, through most of history, that democratic, opportunity to influence the way our country is run was not available for most societies, most people. Here we have what an historic opportunity to do what's right and further the kingdom of God. Let's use it. I think it would be like burying our talent in the ground if we don't vote. Really, that's how I would see it anyway. So we maybe need to touch base here with our viewers as to when life begins. What point does the fetus become a fellow human being made in the image of God, worthy of our protection? How would you explain that to people?
So I think that there are really two questions involved in the debate. When does human life begin, and when do human beings get value or personhood?
Okay.
So the first question is a scientific question. The second question is a philosophical question. All questions grounded in philosophy. But to start with the scientific questions, we have the facts that we can build our philosophy from. We know from science that at fertilization, a new organism of the species Homo sapiens comes into existence. Right? That's just. We know that species reproduce after their own kind, and that species that reproduce sexually begin their life at fertilization. Dogs make dogs, and every dog begins its life at fertilization. Cats make cats, and every cat begins its life at fertilization. Humans make humans, and every human begins its life at fertilization. So we know that at fertilization, there's a new organism of the species Homo sapiens that has come into existence, a new human being. Does that human being have value? And that's the philosophical question. And I would throw it back and say, of course it has value. If it doesn't have value, then what's the concept human rights? What does that even mean? Right? If we don't have, if all human beings don't have human rights, then how can we really call them human rights? The reality is that the only thing that can ground the rights that we have, the only thing that we have in common that we share equally, because whatever it is that gives us value has to be something we share equally. The only thing that seems philosophically relevant is our common biological humanity. It's not our intelligence, it's not our capacity to think, to feel, to experience the world around us, because each of us has different capacities to do that. And even our own capacity to do that varies throughout the day. And yet our value, what makes it wrong to kill you or to kill me, isn't different based on that. And it's not different at different points in time in the day. It's always the same. So whatever it is that gives us that value has to be something we share equally. I would posit the only thing that fits that bill is our common biological humanity. And if we're equal because we're human, the preborn who are just as human as us should share in that equality and should have that full suite of human rights that you and I enjoy.
All right. Appreciate you sharing that for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think often people will look at, well, they're saying it's so small, but size shouldn't matter. If one person's smaller than another, do they have, more value because, one person's larger? I don't think so. And again, location being in the womb, as being outside of the womb, that little 6-inch drop from womb down the birth canal into, oxygenated air. Does that separate a human from a non-human? And again, I think most people would say, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, So, and again, I'm not sure if people realize how many abortions take place every year, why they take place, and do we even realize that Canada has zero limits on gestational limits for abortion? I don't think most people realize that. When they hear that, they go, yeah, we should put some sort of limits in. Like, look at the countries in Europe; they all have some sort of limits that we don't have here.
Yeah, in fact, North Korea, my understanding, North Korea is the only country on earth that has the same abortion regime as Canada. Even China, it used to be North Korea and China that were the two others, but China passed a law just so that they wouldn't be in that camp. They now have laws against abortion that even Canada doesn't have. And every other nation on earth, whether it's France, Sweden, every other advanced country on earth, has recognized that this is problematic. And has
well, we got to get out of that camp. We got to change something in Canada. Now, just looking, where would we look, I guess, to find out if our candidate is pro-life or not? That's one question. And then, do you have any final thoughts for our viewers as to the importance of this election and how to get involved?
So the best way to look is to check the voting record of your member of parliament. So check back and see which pro-life bills have been passed. In the last 3 years, I don't think a pro-life bill has made it to the floor of the House of Commons. Okay. It's a little difficult. But in the past, you had Mary Wagenthal, who's a Conservative MP from Saskatchewan, brought forward the
so where do people go to check their voting records on this?
You can go to openparliament.ca.
Openparliament.ca, okay.
You check up, you look for the specific bill. You can Google Mary Wagenthal's bill and get the number and then check to see where your MP voted. Okay. That's one way of doing it. If you don't have an MP who has a voting record on it, just send them an email.
Okay. And I'm running out of time here, so we're probably going to have to leave this. I know we've already touched base on it here, but again, why this is so important? Well, the babies matter. Life matters. So we're saying go vote. Pray, vote. I'm out of time here. Cameron Wilson, the Wilberforceproject.ca. Thank you for watching. Again, WizeUp.ca. Appreciate any emails you have for us. Paul at WizeUp.ca. And don't forget to subscribe.